Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Matt Benson, and this is The Lion, the Lamb, and the Lawyer. Today we're going to talk about idolatry in America. What I mean by idolatry is that we place an irrational level of importance on wealth, fame, and violence to the point where all three of those things are idols in this country. The first one I want to talk about is America's idolatry of wealth. The unique thing about the American dream is that it's inherently economic. When we talk about doing better than your parents, we're not talking about being healthier or more moralistic than they are. We're talking about making more money. Further, we tend to equate wealth with personal and professional virtue. One reason people put Donald Trump in the White House is they saw his wealth as evidence of his intelligence and business acumen. They didn't really know what kind of real estate developer he was, but they knew that he lived in a golden palace in Manhattan, and that was enough evidence of his effectiveness. But the reality is that wealth does not equal virtue. I've practiced law for 12 years, and one thing I can tell you is being a good lawyer and being good at making money practicing law are two drastically different things. I know great lawyers who barely get by, and I know crappy lawyers who make money hand over fist. Even in an industry that's as money-centric as legal practice, the connection between material wealth and professional effectiveness is a dubious one. And there's even less of a connection between personal virtue and material wealth. There are a lot of kind people who barely survive and a lot of awful people who really, really prosper. There's nothing in the life, teaching, or ministry of Jesus Christ that indicates he intends to function like a cosmic cash box. He told the rich young ruler in Matthew 19 to sell everything he owned and give his money to the poor. Jesus never said anything about blessing people with material possessions. His whole life was about selflessness and benevolence. In fact, I don't think Jesus ever said anything positive about wealthy people unless they were using their wealth to help others. Worshipping a pair of Gucci loafers doesn't leave you any holier than worshipping a golden calf. Equating money with virtue is a form of idolatry, and millions of Americans are guilty of it. The next thing I want to talk about is the idolatry of fame. Social media has turned a lot of otherwise normal people into pseudo-celebrities. For example, there was a mass shooting in Las Vegas a few days before I filmed this, and over 50 people died. One of the people who was present and survived was a guy named Dan Bilzerian, who calls himself the king of Instagram. He's basically made himself famous by taking pictures of himself with guns and half-naked women. He portrays himself as the kind of man that tool-bag frat boys aspire to become. Bilzerian's racked up over 16 million followers on Instagram, playing the part of the gun-toting playboy. He's probably the most famous survivor of the Vegas shooting, and the crazy thing is he's basically just famous for being famous. Bilzerian is one example of the fact that notoriety has the potential to bring you a number of benefits, including money and sex, and a large swath of Americans find that appealing. But I think it's important to acknowledge that fame and notoriety are a means to an end and not an end in themselves. Jesus actually engaged in the opposite of self-promotion. When he performed miracles, he asked people not to tell anybody. So if your ambition is to live like Christ, then drawing earthly attention to whatever good things you've done is probably wrong-headed. Next, I want to talk about the idolatry of violence. According to The Economist, the United States is the most violent industrialized country on the planet, averaging 4.9 annual homicides per 100,000 people. We also have the most firearms in the world. There are approximately 300 million. We're the only country on the planet with more guns than people, and I think that says a lot about our priorities in this country. Now, I own guns, I occasionally carry guns, and I like guns, but what I don't do is fetishize them. I do not tie gun ownership to my personal or professional identity. Our federal budget also reflects our priorities. I support our military and I appreciate the service of the men and women, but I can't support the military-industrial complex. Our country spends $600 billion a year on our military while ignoring our debt and ignoring our infrastructure and ignoring our social safety net. At some point, we decided it was better to defend this country than maintain it. The way we idolize violence carries into our movie choices. Of the top 10 grossing movies of 2016, 5 of them were children's movies. The other 5 were action movies where the good guy shoots the bad guys until the problem gets solved. We want to see that because we have adopted the idea that violence solves our problems. Our violence addiction even seeps into the sports we watch. Football is probably the most violent sport on the planet and is by far the most popular sport in America. In our buying habits, in the federal budget, in the movies we watch, and in the sports we follow, Americans idolize violent behavior, and as a result, we're an unusually violent country. Now, Jesus turned over some tables in the temple, But the defining event of his life was allowing himself to be crucified. He had the ability to stop people from killing him, but he chose not to, and he stopped anyone who did. Jesus told us to turn the other cheek and love our enemies. So the conceit that using violence to solve problems may be very American, but it's not very Christian. Idolatry takes a number of different forms in America. Nobody's walking around worshiping golden calves, but we are worshiping wealth, fame, and violence. To me, being a Christian means trying to be like Jesus, which means we can't worship any of those things. And it also means that we have to follow the two big rules of Christianity. Love your God with all you are, and love your neighbor as yourself. I started this project because if we don't know why we believe, we don't really know what we believe. If you like this video, please consider sharing it with your friends. You can find The Lion, the Lamb, and the Lawyer on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We try to put out a new video once a week. Thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time. I hope you got something out of it.